Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome on behalf of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Texas Association of Mexican American Chambers of Commerce, and the Office of United States Senator John Cornyn. At this time, we will begin our webinar. To ask questions, please use the raise your hand feature in order to be unmuted. At this time, it is our honor and privilege to introduce our President and CEO of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, LeRoy Cavazos.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, LeRoy. As he said, it is our great pleasure to host this important policy discussion during this remarkable period in our nation's history with our great Senator of Texas, John Cornyn. We are joined today by 27 Hispanic chambers in Texas, and it is my honor to partner with our senator to share information and our leaders from the Small Business Administration that the senator will introduce for us to get as much knowledge and get the facts out there about how we can access assistance for our small business owners. The United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is chaired by Carmen Castillo and a board of 18 private sector leaders and chamber CEOs from around the country, representing our 5 million Hispanic-owned businesses, our 250 Hispanic chambers across America, and 60 million Latinos in America that represent $2.2 trillion in economic impact to America, to the world's largest economy, which is the American economy. This period that we are witnessing, it's important that we stay connected and work together. So we're very honored to partner with TAMAC and also represent our board of directors. At this time, I wanted to share, I'll introduce our board member from Region 3, Mayra Pineda, who represents on our board, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma. And after Mayra gives brief remarks, we're gonna give brief remarks to our friends from TAMAC, Sam Guzman, who chairs, or Pauline Anton, the CEO, and then I'll have the honor of introducing our senator right after that. Mayra is our colleague. She represents as the CEO of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana. Mayra, if you could just give us brief remarks, and thank you again for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Ramiro. I would like to thank you and the great team at the USHCC for making this meeting possible today, not only to listen to our longtime friend of USHCC and the Texas Hispanic Chambers, the Honorable John Cornyn, but to bring us together as local chambers serving our communities. It is my honor and privilege to serve on the board of USHCC as a representative of Region 3. What that means to me is that I'm the voice for this region. And I welcome this opportunity of having all of the great Texas Chamber leaders here so that we can come together. I believe COVID-19 is really an opportunity for us to come together and prove how important our mission is to our communities, to advocate for our small businesses out there, and to be that bridge and that voice for that community with the business community at large. So thank you all for being here today, for taking the time, and let's get ready to roll up our sleeves. I know we're all working overtime and very hard right now, but we have a long way ahead of us, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayra, and our prayers are with you and your members in Louisiana during this period also. Thank you for joining us. At this time, I'd like to ask Sam Guzman or Pauline Anton with our longtime advocate for minority business, TAMAC, the Texas Association of Mexican American Chambers of Commerce, to provide brief remarks. Pauline, are you, I think I see you on the line, but I don't know if you're on mute.
Good afternoon, Ramiro. Thank you so very much for this incredible opportunity for us to be able to partner together under incredible circumstances, unfortunately, but it's something that we know that we will live through, we will be stronger, and we can continue growing. And we look forward to be able to visit with Senator Cornyn, a strong leader here in the state of Texas. And on behalf of TMAC and the 700,000 Hispanic businesses, we need the leadership and we appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Pauline, for joining us and for your leadership. It is my pleasure at this time to introduce John Cornyn. He has served in the U.S. Senate since 2002, served our state as our Attorney General for 4 years, and was an Associate Justice with the Supreme Court prior to that, and served in Bexar County as a District Court Judge. He's born in Houston. His father was an Air Force Colonel, and the Senator and I share a great university. He's a law graduate of St. Mary's. I went to graduate school there, and so we're both Rattlers. He also did his undergraduate work at Trinity in San Antonio. He and his wife, Sandy, have 2 daughters, and I'm very grateful to the Senator for his leadership. He's always been a friend. He's a good listener. He's been accessible and very reliable. He's a great champion for us on trade and small business issues. He was one of the first senators that stepped up against any tariffs, and he was a strong leader, and I was honored to join him at the USMCA signing earlier this year. In particular, I want to thank the Senator for always working with the Latino business community. And in fact, he was in 2015, I was in Laredo for the George Washington birthday celebration when Senator Cornyn was given the high honor of Mr. South Texas. So Senator, thank you for joining us. I feel that I saw you more often when I worked in San Antonio than now that I'm in Washington, but clearly we stand together with you at this time and look forward to your remarks, and then open it up to questions and answers. Senator Cornyn, welcome to our community.
Okay, now thanks again, Romero, for that introduction, and I'm experiencing a little virtual backdrop envy. I see your Alamo right there behind you, and as a San Antonio guy, I wish I had that. I'm just here in my office, and but glad to join you. And thanks to LeRoy for the U.S. Hispanic Chamber for organizing the call, and of course TMAC leadership and your members for joining us. I've never lived through an emergency quite like this before. I came to the Senate shortly after 9/11, the terrorist attacks that killed 3,000 Americans in New York and in a field in Pennsylvania and at the Pentagon. I was here in Washington, D.C. in 2008 during the Great Recession and the great meltdown of Wall Street. And even that recession pales in significance to what we're experiencing today, because we're experiencing both a public health crisis and a economic crisis. And so let me start by offering my thoughts and prayers for all of you who've been personally impacted by this virus. I'm sure that's all of us in one way or the other. But we will get through this by working together and supporting one another. Of course, we're in a race against the clock when it comes to responding to this virus, to find treatments, to find a vaccine, and to protect people who are exposed, and to keep those who have not been exposed, to teach them the daily regimen of good hygiene and social distancing. But this call is a great way to get information out about what we've been doing in Congress to get resources out to you and your businesses. As you know, Congress has now passed 3 separate bills to bolster resources for healthcare providers and support workers in business. But what I'd mainly like to do before I respond to any questions that you might have, I want to walk you through the main provisions of the most recent bill called the CARES Act, which was signed by the President last Friday. This is really 3 main pillars to this bill. First is to get individual checks out to people who are not receiving any income through no fault of their own. because, for example, maybe they were a wage worker in the service industry where the restaurant was shut down or their hotel had no longer had any occupancy. So this bill will get a maximum of $3,400 to a family making up to $150,000 a year. That would be for a family of 4. And the goal is to get it in your account in 2 weeks or less. So that will be really the initial lifeline. And we know that while all of us are sheltering at home or and protecting others in the process and maybe watching out for a loved one or homeschooling a child, having some income is going to provide a little bit of anxiety reduction to people who are not receiving any right now. But before I get to the small business portion of this and then also to the larger piece of this, let me talk first about what we're doing for our healthcare providers. This bill provides $100 billion to hospitals that are being crushed by the weight of the workload. This is, as you know, Governor Abbott and the president and the CDC and others have called for hospitals to delay all elective surgery. And as you know, in the healthcare business, there's a lot of cost shifting going on, but private insurance by and large pays for that elective surgery, and Medicaid and Medicare don't pay what it does. So most hospitals have to have a mix of private pay elective surgery patients in order to make the bottom line work. But we know that there's also a shortage of masks and gloves and other equipment to keep not only healthcare providers safe, but also our law enforcement personnel, our first responders. And this legislation includes funding to increase the availability of those resources. So as I said, all of us have been affected either because our kids' schools are closed, travel plans canceled, people are losing jobs and paychecks, and we're all hunkering down and wondering when this will all end. So I mentioned the help that we provided to initially to individuals who are not receiving any income, but we also have a second line of defense when it comes to unemployment insurance benefits. We're beefed up those benefits, including an extra $600 a week in federal unemployment benefits on top of the state's portions. We've seen a huge surge of applications for unemployment insurance, and we want to make sure that whether you're a gig worker or work for a nonprofit, that you're also included. So those who are independent contractors or self-employed, they will be covered as well. We also want to make sure that people have the money they need, obviously through both unemployment insurance and this initial cash distribution to pay their rent or mortgage or bills or groceries or the like. When we finally defeat this virus, which we will, I want to make sure that all of our Hispanic-owned businesses in Texas are standing strong and ready to rehire the employees that they laid off or furloughed, and that they're able to survive through this economic turmoil. Like I said, through no fault of your own, many of your businesses are either closed or you had to dramatically shift operations. And as you know, it's not feasible for most businesses to go weeks, let alone months, without any income. So the major assistance that this bill provides is $350 billion, that's with a B, of Paycheck Protection Program through SBA certified lenders. It's designed to provide 8 weeks of cash flow assistance to small businesses. So you can imagine with anything this big and this legislation this big and having to implement it, there's going to be some bumps. But I know Treasury has now issued its instructions, its directions to local SBA lenders, in other words, your bank or your credit union. And I would really encourage you to talk to your local lender who you do business with as we work through this to make sure these applications are handled on a timely basis and cash begins to flow into your bank account. I know starting tomorrow, they'll be ready to accept those applications, and their goal is to turn it around on the same day. I know that sounds almost too good to be true, but that's what they are shooting for. So if employers maintain their payroll until June, payroll, rent, and utility payments covered by the loan can be completely forgiven. So ultimately, this could be a grant, but it's contingent on maintaining your payroll until June. And in the meantime, your payroll, rent, and utility payments would be covered and completely forgiven. I know that may not be possible for everybody, but if that option works for you and your employees, it's available. This is a new system, of course, and so the banks will need some time to adjust, but having your paperwork ready at the time of the application will be helpful. My website, which is cornyn.senate.gov, or the SBA website, or the U.S. Treasury website, already has guidance for lenders and borrowers. And of course, you can reach out to your small business development centers or minority business development center for technical assistance. So as part of this process to help small businesses defined as 500 employees and under, there's also an opportunity to get an emergency advance of up to $10,000 to cover certain expenses. I understand Angela Burton will be joining us today from the SBA, and I'm sure she'll be happy to answer any questions that she can. She's been a great resource for all of us, and I know particularly for all of us on this teleconference. We're hoping to minimize disruption as much as possible, and the goal really is to avoid layoffs. But if there have to be layoffs, to take care of people in the interim, but to make sure once we defeat this virus, as we will, that there are jobs waiting for folks because the economy will start to recover. We know you don't need any more bureaucracy or red tape. This is a difficult time for all of you, not only as business owners, but as parents, neighbors, and friends. But I want you to know that my staff and I are here to help you in any way we can. And I value my good working relationship with the Hispanic business community. And I want to thank all of you with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and TMAC and others for making this call possible. So at this point, let me just stop, and I'm happy to answer or dodge a few questions as the case may be.
Thank you, Senator, so much for your words and describing this program. And our job is to share as much of that information that you provided to our communities that are representing the need out there due to this crisis. And so with that, Senator, let's open it up to questions, or would we hear from Ms. Burton first with the Small Business Administration here in Texas? LeRoy, what's our best approach moving forward?
I think that we can go ahead and open it up to questions, and obviously Ms. Burton can jump in and help the senator answer questions. So our first question this afternoon, and thank you, Senator, for that insight, is from Sam Guzman, the chairman of the board of the Texas Association of Mexican American Chambers of Commerce. Sam, your line is unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Senator, so much. I mean, we worked with you throughout the years on many crucial situations, and you've always been there for us. And obviously, we need you now more than ever. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam.
My question is, Senator, if you could provide information to us regarding any possible funding that will be available for nonprofits, such as USHCC and TMAC, who can be boots on the ground and provide information and technical assistance to our small businesses.
Yeah, Sam, thank you very much. We did include 501c3s in this particular piece of legislation, but I've already been advised that that may not go far enough. And as you know, there have been some discussion about what a phase 4 bill would look like. We've been working with Secretary Mnuchin, and of course, now the money's been appropriated. There has to be actually this legislation implemented, and that's takes rules. And what he's told us is he will use the maximum discretion that the law allows for him to distribute this money in the way he knows the Congress intended. But we did intend to cover nonprofits, and if we need to do more, we'll be ready to do that in the phase 4.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Our next question, LeRoy. I think you're on mute.
I'm
Thank you,
sorry.
Sam.
Our next question is from Dana Locus. Dana, your line is open. Please go ahead. Dana, are you out there? Your line is open. Maybe you're on mute. Okay, well, in the meantime, let's move on to another question. Our next question, Senator, comes from our good friends at the El Paso Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Cindy Ramos-Davidson. Cindy, your line is open. I also have your questions in front of me, but in the spirit of you being on the phone, Cindy, your line is open, so you may go ahead.
Hello, Senator Cornyn, can you hear me?
I sure can.
I am so sorry. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. The question I had is there a timeline? What do you need from us to expedite the process of phase 4 of the stimulus bill?
Well, Cindy, I think the most useful information I can get from you is as we begin to implement this bill, we need to get real-time feedback on how that's actually working. And to the extent possible, we'll be happy to break up anything that stops or slows down the flow of the funds to the people that Congress intended to get it to the fastest. But as you know, there's sometimes a gap between the concept or approach to legislation and its actual implementation. We experienced that after, for example, Hurricane Harvey. And we saw that the money Congress appropriated took a long, long time to get to the people who needed it the most. And that's regrettable. But here we all recognize that there's a need for speed. And so with speed, we're bound to make some mistakes. There's bound to be some gaps. And there's bound to be some difficulty with the implementation. So that's the thing I think you can help me with the most. So we can go back and we can break up those log jams. We can fill those gaps, and we can correct any mistakes we might have made in our effort to get the money to people fast.
We are a resource partner to SBA Loan Center, and we are helping process the loans. Since this all happened, we've been working with 425 businesses. It is taking a long time, and one to install and that process to upload taking a really long time. So we will share those findings with you and send them to Anna. We could send a letter to her with some recommendations about the stimulus program. I know you're working really hard. Wonder why you're doing what you're doing. Us too. But now that we're on the ground floor, we're doing our Margot come to say hello.
I don't know if it's just my connection, but that little bit of that was hard to understand. So if somebody can help me, I'll be glad.
Yeah, Cindy, could you repeat your question a little bit more clearly? We could not really hear you.
Maybe the connection, who knows?
I sent to Ana Garcia a list of the things we want to do in the stimulus bill, and also some information regarding wait times. And I wanted people to know that the SBA loans are 425 businesses so far, and they funding. And so if you are even if there's any challenge because they're doing the back work, since we are resource providing USDA programs and
Then, Cindy, we are still struggling to hear your question. I know I did hear that you sent some of your questions to Annie Garcia in Senator Cornyn's office. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Well, we'll respond to those questions as promptly as we can, Cindy. So thank you for doing that. Please don't hesitate to continue to keep them coming, and we'll do our very best to be responsive. Thank you.
Senator, our next question is from Dana Locas. She says, I have heard that payroll taxes for businesses under 500 employees can be deferred between now and December 2020 to be paid 50% by December 2021 and another 50% by December 2022. how do businesses enact this measure that's part of the legislation? Do businesses simply stop making deposits, or is there some type of form or application that businesses need to file?
Well, I believe you've accurately described the deferral of the payroll tax provision and then the circumstances under which that will have to be paid. The goal here, of course, is to provide increased liquidity as many businesses are burning through cash and figuring out how to make ends meet. We'll get you some a specific response on that. I'm not for sure whether it's something you just do or whether there's a form or some box you need to check indicating that's your intention, but we'll get that information to all of you. But you did describe the deferral correctly.
Excellent, Senator. Our next question is from Steve. Steve, do businesses apply for both economic injury disaster loans and the Paycheck Protection Program? What is the biggest difference in these items? And do you recommend that we take advantage of both or just one?
Well, I think, take a look at both of them and see what suits your needs the most. Of course, the goal is to try to keep people on payroll as long as possible. Again, I know this is going to turn on individual businesses' circumstances because you may just not be able to afford to do that. But I would say take a look at both basically the refundable tax credit and the forgivable loan and see what makes the most sense to you. But the goal is to keep that lifeline for the small business going so that job's going to be available. But to the extent possible, people can maintain their employees on their payroll. If they can't, then obviously that's where the unemployment insurance provisions, the enhanced benefits kick in.
Excellent, Senator. Our next question comes from the heart of the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, from Cynthia Sakalinsky from the Rio Grande Valley Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Cynthia, you're unmuted. Cynthia?
Cynthia, I think you're on mute. There you go.
Okay, we can come back to Cynthia in a second once we get her line unmuted. Our next question comes from a small business owner, Senator Holly Lewis. As a small business owner, if I have submitted an application on SBA.gov for a disaster loan, should I still contact my bank? Maybe this is a question for Angela Burton, or Senator, please feel free to go ahead.
Well, I'd like to hear what Angela has to say too, but my thought is that you should talk to your banker and tell them that you've filled out the appropriate form so that they can hopefully it can produce any delays. But I don't know if Angela's on the line, maybe she could weigh in.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, I've been trying to answer questions and nobody's listening.
Don't take it personal.
I guess with maybe, I don't know what happened, but I'm very pleased to be here. There are two specific areas right now that you may be looking at. So you probably applied for the economic injury disaster loan, which is a direct loan from the SBA. And then with the CARES Act, there is the Paycheck Protection Program, and that would be done through your local 7A or authorized SBA lender in your area. And so you can, it is my understanding, you can use both, but you cannot use the funding for the same item. In other words, you can't double dip.
That's my
I hope that.
too. Yeah, that's helpful, Angela. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Angela, before we take the next question, could you share, I know you're the SBA director for Texas. Can you point out where our SBA regional offices are in the great state of Texas for everyone to know?
Okay, so there are actually, the regional offices in Fort Worth, Dallas, Fort Worth, but there are actually 6 different district offices in Texas. And Texas is very fortunate to have 6 variety of district offices. So there's one in El Paso, there's one in Dallas-Fort Worth, one in Lubbock, one in San Antonio, one in Houston, and then I am located in the lower Rio Grande Valley. So my office is located in Harlingen. So I'm a district director for one of 6 district offices in the state of Texas.
Thank you, Angela.
And
for that.
I am a former chamber president, so I'm very happy to be here.
Well, God bless you, Angela. Thank you so much for answering our question. LeRoy, it's back to you.
Excellent. So, Senator, a lot of questions coming in about the future and what another 4th phase of a stimulus bill would look like. How can we help Senator John Cornyn and the Hispanic business community be successful in filing this next phase of legislation and stimulus legislation? Will there be a 4th phase?
Well, LeRoy, I'm sure there will be a 4th phase. There's some divergence. You can already begin to hear about what that ought to consist of. But I sort of tried to lay the groundwork early when I said I think we're responding to an emergency. This is not business as usual in Washington, D.C., or at least it shouldn't be. There's some things that are being discussed that we should do anyway, even if there'd never been a coronavirus, which is infrastructure, for example. There's also been a lot of common ground when it comes to prescription drug pricing and out-of-pocket costs and things like that. So those are things we ought to do anyway. And if there seems to be a broad consensus about doing that in the context of a 4th installment on this in this coronavirus response, that's okay with me, but I don't want us to take our eye off the ball. We ought to have first things first, and the first things to me are defeat the virus and then reverse or mitigate the economic harm from the shutdowns and the disruption we've seen. Those ought to be the first things we do. So that's why I think as we continue to hear from you about how what we've done so far is working and where there are gaps, where there are things we need to come back and tweak, to me, those ought to be the first priority. And then if there are other things that we can do outside of the context of this emergency to help the country, like infrastructure, I'm all in.
Thank you, Senator. LeRoy, should we try Cynthia again?
Yes. Cynthia, your line is unmuted. Cynthia Sakalinsky with the Rio Grande Valley Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
She also submitted a question in the chat. The 501c3s are the chamber foundations which normally don't pay their employees from that. They pay from 501c6. Could they possibly be included?
Yeah, let me get back to you on that. Of course, clearly we intended that nonprofits be included, and we may, if we weren't expansive enough in describing exactly what that is, then that's something we'll need to come back and fix. But let me ask my staff to respond back to you directly on that question, because I don't know off the top of my head.
Thank you. And Senator, if I may share, and I think Angela was wanting to make a remark, but on behalf of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and I know we heard from our chairman from TAMAC, Sam Guzman, we are also working with our friends at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C. We feel that as phase 4, we will be advocates for delineating that 501c6s are included. We feel that at least for Hispanic chambers, the 250 around the country are economic centers of influence, positive influence in their communities, and many of them have small staffs. They themselves, like small businesses, are fragile, but they're providing a lot of the outreach and support to the SBAs and their dues-paying members to the information that you and your fellow senators are working so hard to submit. So on behalf of us, Senator, we will send to your office a letter asking for that to be included in the next phase so you can hear directly from all of us.
Romero, I can't imagine a world in which that would be controversial, but we would welcome your letter and we'll certainly take care of it.
Thank you, Senator.
I would just like to add that the 501c6s are eligible for the economic injury disaster loan and advance. Those can be loans up to $2 million. They can be used for fixed debt, payroll, accounts payable, and other bills. That is for nonprofits a 2.75 interest rate, and it can be a long-term repayment of 30 years. So that is an opportunity for 501c6s at least to get some funding in the door.
Excellent.
Thank you, Angela, for clarifying that. We appreciate that.
Senator, our next question is from Cristina Rodriguez. Cristina, I am a small business manager for a small private dental practice and wanted to ask about unemployment benefits. Our office is currently shut down as a result of COVID-19, and we were directed to file unemployment. My question is, would we continue to utilize the benefits from the Texas Workforce Commission, or should our employer apply for the payroll loan instead of filing for unemployment?
Well, I would do both, and then of course the Texas Workforce Commission has been crushed by a lot of applications, and they are working hard to keep up with the volume. But of course, the benefits to of unemployment insurance go to the individual, and then the other benefit would go to the employer of that individual, and both are recoverable. And so I would do both.
Excellent. So our next question, Senator, is from John Martinez. John, you're unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yes, Senator. Thank you to everyone for doing this phone call today. I'm especially appreciative of the two programs because construction is usually for a small contractor. It's really hard to get loans, so I appreciate that. This question may be off topic, but a lot of our small businesses, contractors, I'm speaking only on construction, we need access to thermometers and those kind of things. We want to do the right thing by our employees. We want to take care of them. And the small companies, a lot of them are family members or people who are related to family members, but they can't get a hold of the supply. Some of our larger either had it in stock or are hiring medical companies that are coming in at a higher price, but our small ones are being left out of the supply chain. Have you heard anything about those new supplies coming in?
Yeah, John, I think there was, of course, this immediate demand, and then there had to be sort of a triage take place, and most of this protective equipment, for example, went to the healthcare providers and the first responders, the police and others. And then of course the testing, which has ramped up dramatically. But my staff is on this phone call, on this teleconference too. Let us do a little research and get back with you, because I know that while I think there's a lot more available, we have been pretty much dependent on the Chinese supply chain for a lot of this stuff. This is one of the lessons we're going to have to learn from, but there hasn't been uniform distribution based on need. And so let us investigate that and get back with you shortly.
Excellent. This next question comes from Eric Donnelly. We are a CDFI operating throughout Texas. Historically, financial institutions have been ineligible for SBA financing. Is this still the case for the Paycheck Protection Program? Also, when will application documents become approved for non-bank lenders for this program?
Well, I may need Angela's help a little bit, but let me take a stab at it. This is not a traditional part of the SBA's function. We have created something new, which goes through SBA certified lenders on the Paycheck Protection provision. And the goal is to work directly with your established lending institution, your bank or credit union, but they should be SBA certified. And if they're not, then there's some effort to expand that as well. So maybe Angela, if you're listening, you can help a little bit there. But
Yes,
go ahead.
it's difficult to comment on this because we haven't been provided the guidance, but I have read that the Department of Treasury will work to help get some of these folks on board with the program. Again, you know, it's too soon to tell. We're still working on the actual rules and policy for the actual program.
Yeah, we're all working as fast as we can, and unfortunately, it's never quite as fast as you would hope. But Angela's exactly right. They've got to wait till they get the rules rolled out. But again, the goal of the CARES Act was to try to make sure that we didn't go through the usual bureaucracy, but we went essentially around the bureaucracy. Don't get me wrong, Angela, bureaucracies can sometimes be good, but they're not known for their speed. And that's what our goal is here by doing it through these SBA certified lenders, but working directly with your local bank.
Excellent. Our next question, Senator, and I know that there's been a lot of hard work that has been done across party lines on this next topic, and thank you for your leadership. But people are asking through the chat, the majority of employers who we have on payroll are 1099 employees, but are paid regularly. How do we handle 1099 employees? Will 1099 employees also be covered under the Paycheck Protection Program?
Just to clarify, LeRoy, is that those be independent contractors?
Correct, Senator.
Yes, they would be. They're covered under the provisions of the CARES Act. Particularly when it comes to the unemployment insurance, I'm not sure whether and if they qualify as an employer in their own right, then they could apply for these SBA certified lender packages that we've been talking about. But they certainly would be, independent contractors would be covered by the unemployment compensation portion. And if they are indeed a small business unto themselves, they could independently apply.
Excellent. This next question is for the Senator or Angela Burton. This question is from Edna Posada. Edna would like to know, in order to qualify for the economic injury disaster loans, is it true that the small businesses that can get financing elsewhere will not qualify for the SBA injury loans if they get financing from other banking institutions?
It's my understanding that the credit available elsewhere requirement was waived by the CARES Act.
It was waived, Angela?
Yes, it's my understanding it was waived.
Excellent. Senator, this next question comes from Alexander Robledo. Alexander would like to know if there's any plans or conversations legislatively to ask financial institutions to start thinking about freezing mortgage accounts or delaying payments on mortgages. We have a lot of members of our organization who are owners of rental properties or who operate their businesses through Airbnb rentals. How can we help these business owners get a freeze on their mortgage through financial institutions?
Well, of course, a lot of the financial institutions will work with their customers in their own right to negotiate terms. And I think seems to be a lot of we're all in it together attitude about that. I know there's been some announcements from the Department of Housing and Urban Development on this issue as well. Let me get you some specific information about that through my staff. Jacob Smith and some other folks on my staff who are working on that issue are on the call, and we'll circle back with you with some specific information.
Excellent. And our last question, Senator, before we turn it back to Ramiro and yourself for closing remarks, is from Christy Martinez Garcia. Christy is asking that there is still a lot of unclarity when it comes to the nonprofit sector and what kind of funding nonprofits can access to provide services during this pandemic. what services were approved through the CARES Act that qualify nonprofits to provide technical assistance in communities?
Well, it was clearly Congress's intent to cover nonprofits, and recognizing, as we've heard here, that nonprofits employ a lot of people, even though they may be relatively small, it adds up to a lot. As you've also heard, there's some, maybe it wasn't as comprehensive in describing what those nonprofits were, which provision of the tax code would apply. And so let us get you some specific information about that so I don't give you some bad information inadvertently here. But again, if we haven't covered it adequately in the CARES Act, I'll make sure, working with you, we do so in the next installment of the COVID-19 response.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Senator. At this time, I'll turn it back to Ramiro and yourself for closing remarks. We want to be respectful of your time that you've given us today.
Thank you, LeRoy. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Senator, we had more than 200 people registered for our conversation with you today. Thank you for your leadership on the CARES Act and for your public service during your career representing us. Thank you for your leadership on trade issues, on veterans issues, and helping our Latino and small business issues. The U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce will continue to work closely with you and Annie and your staff to be a bridge to our Texans and the leaders in our region that Mayra Pineda represents through the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. It's my honor as the CEO of our national association to partner with the Texas Association of Mexican American Chambers of Commerce, Sam Guzman, Pauline Anton, with our 27 plus chambers. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We look forward to more conversations with the Small Business Administration. And Senator, thank you for your time today and your leadership at this time during these very challenging period. Wanted to give you the floor to maybe provide some closing remarks, and then I want to thank everyone that called in, and any questions that have been submitted we will answer and send back to our participants today. Senator, thank you, and please share a final word for our participants.
Well, Ramiro, even though you have bigger responsibilities now, you will always be first and foremost a Texan. And so thank you for your longtime friendship and your leadership. And thanks to all of you on this call. These are historic times we're living through. Each one of us are being called to make sacrifices and to respond to our patriotic duty in one way or the other. And first and foremost, that is to keep yourself and your family and your friends and neighbors safe, and do all the things that Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, and other public health experts are telling us to do. We know that this virus cannot leap tall buildings in a single bound, but we do know that we have to maintain 6 feet or more of separation and maintain obviously good individual hygiene. So keeping yourself healthy and your family healthy is job number one. But once we also know that the economic impact of this virus is devastating to individuals and small businesses. And we want to make sure that when we defeat the virus, which we will, we always have, and throughout our history, when confronted with challenges like this, we've always defeated that challenge, but we want to make sure that our economy recovers as soon as possible on the back end. The projections you and I have seen from JP Morgan and other experts say we're going through a recession, of course, this quarter and then the next quarter, which will be particularly tough. But then if we do everything we know we need to do, then the economy will rebound rather quickly coming in the third and fourth quarter. Not everybody at the same speed, but our goal is to make sure that we maintain as much economic activity and viability as we possibly can through this public health crisis period. So thank you all for your friendship, and thanks for your leadership. We're all in this together, and together we will prevail. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Senator. This concludes today's webinar, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining the office of U.S. Senator John Cornyn and the United States Hispanic Chamber of